Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by the following: IU Health Southern Indiana physicians, primary care and specialty care providers now accepting new patients in Bloomington and throughout South Central Indiana. siphysicians.org. IU Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research, working to improve cybersecurity and provide policy guidance through partnerships with industry, government, and academia. Main Source Bank, headquartered in Greensburg, Indiana, offering products and services to fit every stage of life. More information at mainsourcebank.com. Main Source, life needs a great bank. Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
Smithville Fiber, the Gigacity Company, fiber internet, HD, and digital IPTV in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com.
And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. About half of the country's illegal immigrants are from Mexico. The president wants to increase immigration enforcement and the people who are targeted for deportation.
Everybody's wondering, what am I next?
Coming up, we take you to northern Indiana, where families say their goodbyes before their loved ones are deported. Organic food and local food is big business. Increasingly, niche stores are competing against big grocery chains for a stake in the market.
We're putting a heavy emphasis on new products and stores and differentiating ourselves from everybody else.
But is there enough business to go around? Plus, lawmakers face a critical deadline this week. We know now which items are getting shelved for the time being and what lawmakers will prioritize during the remaining days of the session. And we'll have the latest news headlines from across the state, all coming up right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. The Trump administration is laying out its plans for ramping up enforcement of illegal immigration. Memos released Tuesday by the Department of Homeland Security say the agency is changing the way it prioritizes people for deportation. Few people will be exempt from enforcement. And when people who've entered the country illegally are detained in the Midwest, some of them fly out of Indiana for deportation. Barbara Brosier brings us the story from the northern part of the state, where every week families say their goodbyes not knowing when they'll see each other again.
It's just before 7 in the morning in this noisy, industrial Chicagoland neighborhood. People are slowly filing onto the sidewalk in front of a brown brick building that's surrounded by fencing and barbed wire.
Every Friday since December 2006, we've been holding a prayer vigil.
The unmarked building that serves as the backdrop for the vigil is a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement detention center. The immigrants inside are transported here after they're taken into custody for being in the country illegally. Every Friday for the past 10 years, members of the Interfaith Committee for Detained Immigrants pray outside as families say their goodbyes.
We knew that we had to be here every Friday because we realized what our country was doing to our immigrant sisters and brothers, and we saw the families being ripped apart.
This marks the 11th year for the weekly vigils. And it's clear from Berg's message today, the mood here has shifted since the election of President Donald Trump.
Today marks the fourth anniversary, the fourth week rather, of our new president in office. A period that has resulted in a lot of tumult as he's issued a series of executive orders that have caused great fear and hardship and suffering to our immigrant brothers and sisters.
Department of Homeland Security memos released this week say few people who entered the country illegally will be exempt from enforcement of federal immigration laws. It will prioritize not only those convicted of crimes, but also those with pending criminal charges, those who immigration officers determine are a risk to public safety or national security, and people who have abused any program related to the receipt of public benefits.
They're anxious. Everybody's anxious, and the people we're visiting in detention centers are anxious. Our volunteers and staff were anxious because the way that things were done left everyone reeling and wondering, like, what does this mean? And it seems like it's fear tactics to kind of scare the immigrant community.
Some of the nuns go inside to pray with those being deported. They say there are about 60 immigrants leaving today. Those who are being deported are loaded onto 2 buses that have the windows blacked out, unaware of where they are or when they'll see their families again.
This is the end, and every Friday is hard.
The buses bring the immigrants here to the Gary-Chicago airport, where a charter flight takes them south, then they're processed for deportation. Federal immigration officials didn't respond to our request for an interview about how many immigrants are flown out of this airport for deportation and how often. ICE says on its website it conducted more removals during the 2016 fiscal year than in 2015. We know it happens at least once a week here in Gary. Buses bring people to the airport in shackles, where they're searched before boarding the plane.
Definitely the immigration system is completely broken. For many people, there is no legal path to come here.
So every Friday, the group will continue to gather outside the detention center where the deportation process begins, hoping their words will inspire action.
Oh, deep in my heart. Raise your hands high. I do believe we shall overcome this year.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Barbara Brozier.
We don't know which city in Mexico the deportees were headed to. In some cases, it can be thousands of miles from their old home in Mexico. They often don't have anything with them and have to figure out how to get an ID, how to find a place to stay, and some way to earn a living. Mexico's president has pledged $50 million to help people who are facing deportation, and the government has also created a hotline for Mexicans living in the U.S. to call with questions if they're worried about being deported. One of the things that is different about a lot of the Mexicans living in the U.S. compared to other populations in the U.S. illegally is that they've been here for many years and have families here. Illegal immigration from Mexico to the U.S. has been about net zero for years now. And now for headlines, we go over to Barbara Brozier, who has the latest on this week's top stories.
Thanks, Joe. A packed house showed up for a town hall last night in West Lafayette, but the person most people had hoped to see in attendance wasn't there. Organizers set up the event and invited U.S. Representative Todd Rokita. They were hoping to have a conversation with him while he's on recess this week from Washington. Rokita did not respond to their invitation.
We organize this as a meeting instead of as a protest or a rally, because we are seriously and sincerely trying to keep things civil.
The attendees broke into groups based on topics including things like women's issues, immigration, and education. They drafted questions to send to Rokita's office. Now, we reached out to Indiana's 2 senators, Todd Young and Joe Donnelly, the number of representatives, including Trey Hollingsworth, Susan Brooks, and Jackie Walorski, but didn't hear word that any of them are holding town halls with constituents during this week's congressional recess. 7 U.S. representatives from Indiana recently voted to make it possible for states to block federal dollars meant for centers like Planned Parenthood. At a Statehouse rally this week, supporters continued to tout the health care services that the nonprofit provides. The Health Access and Privacy Alliance, which organized the event, says nearly 50,000 Hoosiers will lose access to health services if Planned Parenthood closes. Democratic National Committee members will vote for the next party chair tomorrow. South Bend's Mayor Pete Buttigieg is among the contenders. He was recently endorsed by former party chair Howard Dean. The ACLU of Indiana is speaking out against President Trump's decision to remove Title IX guidelines that seek to protect the rights of transgender students.
We know that trans children in public schools face incredible rates of harassment and discrimination. Up to 75% of trans children report feeling unsafe in schools.
Meanwhile, the Supreme Court agreed to hear a Virginia case next month involving a transgender student using the school bathroom. That case has strong ties to the newly rescinded guidelines. The overdose antidote naloxone saved more than 2,000 Indianapolis residents last year, and Mayor Joe Hogsett credits the city's Narcan program, which provides training and kits to community members. He wants to expand the city's efforts even more and offer training to local community providers.
While Narcan in the hands of our first responders has saved thousands of lives. For some, by the time our first responders arrive, it's too late.
Hogsett kicked off a naloxone training class in Marion County for homeless outreach providers. He says the only way to see drug overdose rates decline is to get naloxone in the hands of these providers because they work directly with those who are at high risk of overdose. A convicted killer who's garnered national attention is now in Terre Haute's federal prison. Drew Peterson was transferred to the prison from a facility in Illinois. Peterson was sentenced to 38 years in prison for the death of his third wife, Kathleen Savio. The investigation into her death was reopened when Peterson's fourth wife, Stacy Peterson, went missing in 2007. Peterson was sentenced to another 40 years last year for plotting to hire someone to kill the prosecutor who won the case against him. The former Kokomo YMCA is being converted to housing. The $6.5 million redevelopment will include 46 units.
Keep in mind, YMCA's at that time were built for more temporary housing, more transient housing back then. So it has a look that would be similar to a small hotel.
The apartments will be ready by summer 2019. A new YMCA opened a year ago across the street. Goodnight says membership has since doubled. Well, after an unusually warm week, we're expecting the temperature to take a significant dip tonight. The rapid change in weather is making many wonder if their already sprouted plants are at risk.
If say you have fruit trees that have bloomed or a flowering shrub that is really bloomed out and then it freezes and rains to bloom, that's it for this year. But the plants shouldn't be killed, I wouldn't think.
And even though some possible flurries are coming too, plants should be able to survive unless it gets extremely cold. Let us remember too, spring arrives in less than a month, folks, so plants won't have to brave winter weather much longer. Those cold temps, though, could be good news for some of Indiana's ski slopes. Paoli Peaks was forced to suspend its operations this week, so it's closed at least temporarily. Then today, Perfect North Slopes, Joe, decided that it's going to suspend operations as well. Just take it day by day for the rest of this odd winter season.
We're kind of used to that day by day in Indiana. You never know what it's going to do.
It's hard to dress when it's warm one day, freezing the next.
Thanks, Barbara. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk, is the availability of local food outpacing demand? Coming up, what grocers are doing to compete for your business? The Oscars are this weekend. Did you know the statues belonging to the director who's won the most awards are housed right here in Indiana? We'll show you coming up. That and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
Nature takes you places where you've never gone before.
It's watching something that's actually happened.
Nature sure draw me in the story.
Just their power and their grace.
You know, it was just so beautiful to watch them.
The movement and just watching the body and watching the chase.
Like this huge, lush, vibrant watercolor.
Tim's.
There was such a shot of underneath watching these elephants swim in this deep water.
I had no idea even they could swim like that.
I saw one monkey pulling on this one monkey's tail, and the monkey like, man, what you doing? What you doing?
It's like the theater of the wild or something.
7 billion trillion animals living on one planet.
It's like more colorful than than you think life can possibly be.
Somewhere between the mystique and the beauty of it is reason enough to sit down and watch.
That's life, and that's nature.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Grocers are responding to a demand for organic and local food. They're opening more stores and offering more products. It's a good thing for consumers, but as Hallie Pilot reports, it's a gamble for some stores as they work to differentiate themselves from their competition and earn your business.
Marissa Fusner shops at Blooming Foods for most of her groceries. She says she likes the personalized feel of a co-op.
I think Blooming Foods is special because it has so many organic products and it's a more intimate store. Like Kroger and all the other ones are so big that it's hard to find everything, and like everybody here is so nice and helpful.
Blooming Foods also recognizes the importance of its relationship with customers.
Everybody that contacts me gets an answer or a phone call or a discussion because we care. And I've had people contact me, please stop selling this product, please bring in this product, I don't like this policy. Everybody gets personal attention.
Kroger is beginning to move toward a more specialized approach with its products. The chain has 8.5 million customers every day across the country, but each person's voice is still important.
I think more and more is based on customer feedback. If somebody wants to come in and say, we'd really like to see that, we'll listen. So I think it's amazing how influential a few phone calls can be.
Along with more organic produce, Kroger stores have begun to carry more specialized products just like Blooming Foods has for years. That's everything from coffee beans to organic soaps that are made in Indiana. This reflects the growing need for organic products, a demand that grows 4 to 8% each year. And along with the demand for organic products comes a demand for local products. Producers and retailers have even begun to affix Indiana-grown labels to their products to make it easier for customers to identify things that are local.
There is a desire on the part of many consumers to support that local farmer in his or her products. And I tell you, it's heartwarming to see that.
Workers are finishing up the construction of a Fresh Time store. It looks nearly complete from the outside. It's opening in Bloomington next month. The store will specialize in local, organic food. Then, coming this fall, a 365 by Whole Foods within walking distance of Blooming Foods' flagship store. The familiar situation for Blooming Foods. Lucky's, another specialized grocer that opened in Bloomington in 2015, siphoned a lot of business away from Blooming Foods, forcing the co-op to close the doors at its Elm Heights location the following spring. Call it spying or sizing up your competition, but Blooming Foods execs are taking a more aggressive stance this time. A group flew to Portland recently to see what they're up against when Whole Foods opens.
So we wanted to get a jump on what the store was, what it's going to be, what might we need to do to compete better against that. So no, it's not something we can wait. I think in fairness, if you look at what happened when Lucky's opened in town, we waited, and we're not in a position to do that anymore.
The future, McKinney says, is about diversification. He thinks there's room for everyone because he doesn't anticipate demand slowing down.
Well, the whole movement toward niche markets continues to grow nationwide, and the same goes for here in Indiana.
According to the Organic Trade Association, the amount of money Americans spend on organic food has more than doubled in the past decade, to more than $43 billion in 2015. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Hallie Pilot.
A bill that would have prohibited logging in portions of the state forest is dead after failing to get a vote in committee. As Becca Costello reports, the hundreds of Hoosiers who gathered at the Statehouse Monday to support the measure say their fight isn't over.
Groups like the Indiana Forest Alliance have advocated for years for a law requiring some of the state forests be preserved from logging. Senate Bill 420 would have set aside 10% of the state forests where harvesting timber isn't allowed.
Last year, there was a request, a bill that would have set aside 23% of state forests and would have created what we call state wild areas, which would be for recreation and would not be logged.
That measure didn't even get a hearing. Logging in the state forest has increased 400% in the past decade. The Indiana Forest Alliance blames former Governor Mitch Daniels for slashing the Division of Forestry's budget and making the agency responsible for generating more of its operating costs. But the Division of Forestry says the only motivation is the health of the state forests.
I mean, when I came here in 2005, the foresters saying, Jack, you need to do something. This forest is aging and there's mortality picking up everywhere. And the question is, do you continue to let 10 million feet a year die because you really can't control it? It's an evolution.
The Indiana Forest Alliance is conducting a study analyzing the economic impact of logging in the state. It could be released this spring. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Becca Costello.
Joining us now with the latest news from the Statehouse is IPBS reporter Brandon Smith. Brandon, we want to talk about a bill that is already dead but is still the source of controversy. There's efforts toward redistricting fell apart this week when a redistricting bill did not receive a vote at a committee meeting. Tell us a bit about why that bill didn't get a vote and what's next for those hoping for district reform.
Well, the bill didn't get a vote because if it had, it likely would have been voted down. At least that's what Speaker Brian Bosma tells us. Now, Committee Chair Milo Smith, who canceled the vote, he has a different excuse. He says the bill had too many issues.
If you read the bill clearly, it says that the Redistrict Commission draws the maps, we go into special session, and if we vote those maps down, then we go back into a second special session, but it was silent after that.
As for what's next, the bill is dead this session, but this is an effort that's historically had support from 3 out of the 4 caucuses at the Statehouse, so there is some hope for the future.
Now, a bill that would have made the superintendent of public instruction an appointed position was voted down this week. A Senate bill proposed a 70% decrease in pre-K funding, and then a bill that could spare some charter schools from consequences for poor student performance was approved. What can you tell us about the state of I-STEP in 2018-2019?
Well, there's widespread agreement that the current I-STEP has to go. It's too long, it takes too long to grade, and it costs too much money. Now, as for the bill in question, there's been some criticism of it in that it doesn't go far enough in creating the replacement. But bill author Bob Baining says that it does incorporate recommendations from a summer study committee of educators looking at the test.
It took a long time. There was a lot of criticism along the way that we weren't moving fast enough, but to be successful, I think you have to be willing to listen and take everybody's thoughts and kind of put that together in a plan that hopefully we can move forward.
Honestly, there hasn't been much debate on that bill this session. The hard work really comes after its passage later on.
A bill prohibiting state universities and campuses from establishing sanctuary policies went through committee. The bill's author argues the bill is expanding existing legislation to include another government entity, state colleges and universities.
We shouldn't make a law and say, hey, this government entity has to follow this law, and that same law, this government entity doesn't have to follow. It doesn't seem like that's right.
So Brandon, do you expect this bill will be a subject of debate as it moves forward?
Well, certainly. Immigration issues are obviously a hot button topic right now, no matter what. That being said, this bill does only extend current law a little bit, so it's likely to have a relatively easy time moving through the legislature.
And Brandon, 2 topics garnering a lot of attention at the Statehouse are abortion and vaping, or e-cigarettes. What's the latest on these?
Well, the e-cigarettes issue has arguably become a lot simpler. A recent court ruling said that Indiana can impose virtually any regulations on out-of-state e-liquid manufacturers. So an effort to reform current regulations has been significantly scaled back. Bill author Republican Randy Head said he doesn't want to impose more rules on Indiana companies than on out-of-state ones. As for abortion, there are 2 bills moving right now. One mandates doctors tell women that medication-induced abortions could possibly be reversed even though there's no scientific evidence for that. The other bill deals with notifying parents when their child wants to get an abortion without their consent.
Well, next Tuesday is the last day for the Senate to receive House bills. We'll continue following the legislature and bring you the latest each week. And now we take a look back at what was making the news in our History Through Headlines segment. It was 1992. Bill Clinton was elected president. The Rodney King riots rocked Los Angeles. Eric Clapton released Tears in Heaven, and A League of Their Own premiered in theaters. The headline reads, Memories of the Way Things Were. The film tells the story of the Rockford Peaches, a women's professional baseball team. This year marks the 25th anniversary of the film, starring Tom Hanks, Gina Davis, Rosie O'Donnell, and Madonna. Bosse Field was built in Evansville, Indiana in 1915 and served as the backdrop for many of the film's scenes.
This is the 3rd oldest ballpark in America behind Wrigley Field and Fenway, so we're one of the most historic places in Evansville, and I think also one of the most historic places in all of baseball.
Filmmakers needed a small-town stadium that would fit in the 1940s.
With Bosse being such an historic place, it has that old-timey feel set during World War II, so it just kind of made sense for them to find an old ballpark.
The film is best known for Tom Hanks' iconic line, which was filmed at the park.
There's no crying! There's no crying in baseball!
Bosse Field has featured showings of the film and has had actors return for the film's 20th anniversary. They hope to have some of the actors come back to the field for the film's 25th year celebration.
Fingers crossed, if Tom Hanks sees this, that we can get him to come back out, and we'd love to have him back.
Bosse Field has hosted many teams throughout the decades, with 100 Hall of Famers having played on the field. Today, they're the home of the Evansville Otters. Well, we ran out of time to bring you the Oscars collection tonight, but you can find it on our website. We do leave you tonight with this footage of the endangered barn owl. According to the Indiana DNR website, these owls are living in southern Indiana, and this footage is from a feed of one of their nesting places. That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by the following: IU Health Southern Indiana physicians, primary care and specialty care providers now accepting new patients in Bloomington and throughout South Central Indiana. siphysicians.org. IU Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research, working to improve cybersecurity and provide policy guidance through partnerships with industry, government, and academia. Main Source Bank, headquartered in Greensburg, Indiana, offering products and services to fit every stage of life. More information at mainsourcebank.com. Main Source, life needs a great bank. Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
Smithville Fiber, the Gigacity Company. Fiber Internet, HD, and digital IPTV in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com.
And by WTIU members. Thank you.